Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Grant Swartzwelder, President of OTA Environmental Solutions. We're very happy that you're joining us for this edition of the Oilfield Strong webinar series. As you know, it happens every first Wednesday. If you miss it, or if you just like hearing Adrienne talk, our guest, so much so that you want to just keep hearing her, then you can go onto our YouTube channel under OTA Compression, and we'll be loading that on. All our previous presentations will also be on there, so you can go back and look. We do have in May, Robert Anderson, the CEO of Earthstone, will be on. Earthstone's been very popular with acquisitions, and he's going to talk about the integration that they've done here in the Permian. So that'll be interesting. We're firming up April, and you'll be getting an announcement of that shortly. So without further ado, let me introduce Adrienne Sandoval. She's Director of the Oil Conservation Division for New Mexico's regulation. She is, I first became aware of Adrienne when she spoke at the Permian Basin Petroleum Association annual meeting. And quite frankly, Adrienne, I was very impressed. It's, you know, to find speakers that actually know what they're talking about and communicate it in a concise way, you don't always find that. So when we found that, I thought that was, and especially with the subject of being New Mexico regulation, it's a kind of complicated subject. So I think I was excited that you were willing to come and speak, because I think there's a lot of folks that could really use some additional schooling on that, especially what's happened over the last several months. But Adrienne's background has been, she has a master's in chemical engineering, a bachelor's in chemistry from University of Tulsa, has worked for Williams out in the field, worked for Marathon in the office, and I'm sure in the field, but on environmental stuff. So the nice thing about Adrienne, from my sense, and you'll hear from when she talks, she's actually walked the walk in the oil field. So it's kind of a nice, kind of a fresh way of looking at regulation when someone actually knows kind of, well, how that regulation really affects the oil field. So with that introduction, Adrienne, thank you very much for being here. And let me start off, just for everyone's benefit, explain to me, or to everyone, OCD, and because I'm also hearing that it's like you governments do regulation for some things, but then there's other groups and keeping up with it, and help us kind of understand how that fits.
Yeah, so the Oil Conservation Division in New Mexico sits under the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department. We usually shorten that and call it EMNRD. Under EMNRD, there are 5 divisions. So there's the Oil Conservation Division, there's Mining and Minerals, there is the State Forestry, State Parks, and then Energy Conservation and Management Division. The Oil Conservation Division, we are charged with protecting correlative rights, preventing waste, and then protecting human health and the environment. I think sometimes there can be some confusion between what we do and what we regulate, and the Environment Department, which is an entirely separate department, particularly in some of our rules in the last year or so on waste. So we manage the waste of a resource. And so when you vent or flare natural gas, that is the waste of a saleable resource from our perspective. Whereas, for example, the Environment Department is looking at emissions and how venting and flaring leads to emissions and air quality and ties into air quality. So different statutes, different regulations, there can be some similarities, but at the end of the day, we are regulating different things.
Fair enough. So from our standpoint, looking at emissions and water seems to be 2 of the larger areas that would fit under your world. So, well, you know, at the PBPA, talked about a variety of regulation that was kind of coming down the pipe, and it seemed like since October there's been quite a few additions and changes. So kind of let me throw out just a general, I do know I want to talk about produced water rule, waste rule, spill rule. Those seem to be the really key ones. And everyone in the audience, if you have a specific question, we'll take those. Just use the buttons down below, and we'll get to your questions as well. But Adrienne, back to if you want to just kind of talk about kind of how you've seen things change since October and specific things, and then we can talk specifically about those three or so.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a lot going on. I will just note that if you're ever wondering what is happening, go to our announcement site. We try to be as transparent as possible and put everything out so that everybody knows exactly what they should be doing. So our announcements page is the best place to start for anything new, any information. Check out the announcements page. There is a lot out there. So since October, let's see, our first quarterly report was due on the waste rule. So the waste rule went into effect back in May of last year, after about 2 years of stakeholder engagement and then a public hearing. It went into effect in May. There were kind of tiers and timelines as to what went into effect when. The first, when you started to collect data, was in October. October through December was the first quarterly report. That first quarterly report was due 2 weeks ago, basically, on February 15th. The next quarterly report, which is going to span from January up until March, will be due in May. Those two quarterly reports are going to be combined together kind of at that May time, and it's going to set everybody's baseline. The baseline is the point where everybody basically starts at. We recognize everybody's going to be in a different spot, but at the end of 2026, everybody needs to be at 98% gas capture. Now, what we've seen is some companies may already be there. Other companies have a ways to go. And so, that baseline basically tells you where you're starting and how far you have to go each year. So, you're going to start kind of attaining your gas capture starting in that April-May timeframe, and you're going to have each year a metric that you're going to need to hit. It's going to be different for each company because they're all starting at a different place. So some companies may have to, kind of jump up 5% each year. Others, it may be 0.5%, sort of, again, depending on where you're starting, but everybody has to get to the same end goal. And so that's, it's really important to make sure to get that data in. It was due on the 15th. We sent out letters to all of the operators who did not report. It was a substantial number of letters that were sent out, but we were happy to see, when we looked at the data holistically, I believe it was about 95% of the gas produced in the state was reported. So that's really important, kind of a metric. I think it was around 75% of the wells in the state were reported on time, but 95% of the gas produced. So again, the companies that did not report, we sent you all a letter that basically said, hey, don't forget, there was a compliance requirement. We have had a handful of companies report. A lot of people are working on making sure to get that information in. Even if you did not vent or flare, you still have to report, because there is no way for us to know whether you're just not reporting or if you truly vented and flared nothing. So you still have to report. You just got to go in there and put zeros. Again, the announcements page is going to be really, a great tool for everybody. I think we have hundreds of FAQ questions on there. We have guidance documents on how to file your C-115Bs, which is your quarterly report. Tons of information out on the website. If you are still struggling, you can email EMNRD, EMNRD .wasterule, all one section, at state.nm.us. I would encourage you, if you are having a moment right now and going, oh my God, I did not report, to reach out to us as soon as possible. And see what can be done, because technically operators who have not reported at this point are out of compliance. So we're happy to kind of, we've been working with lots of companies. We've fielded hundreds of emails and questions trying to help people get those reports in. But You know, we will continue to be looking at those lists and maybe taking compliance actions as we feel necessary for companies who haven't reported, you know, in the coming weeks to months. So that's really important. I think that's kind of where. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
So you get the baseline for these 2 quarters, and then from there, you will be determining a certain percent that they have to hit each quarter thereafter, so that they basically remove 96%, so they go down to 4% in 2026. Did I phrase that right? Or I just want to make sure everyone knows how this is really working.
They have to get to 98% by the end of 2026. So 98's the goal. Yep. But yes, basically those 2 quarterly reports, the data is going to be combined, and it's going to set a baseline. Operators may rate, you know, we might have some operators who are reporting they're already at 98%, whereas another operator may be at 90, 85, 80. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. So then basically
90% of total flaring or total gas or
total gas produced.
Total gas produced. Okay. So
yeah. Yeah, so that's how that's basically what the gas capture is how much stayed in the pipe versus being vented and flared. Throughout the rule, you know, the rule recognizes a lot of reasons why you may need to vent or flare for your operations. And, you know, we really listened during the stakeholder engagement process, and we heard, you know, one size doesn't fit all. You know, flexibility is important, innovation is important, don't box us in. And we really took that to heart. And so we're not telling people how you need to attain 98%, but I am putting strict borders on either side to make sure that you attain those goals. So for one operator, it may be venting from tanks. Another operator, it could be pipeline blowdowns as they see their opportunities to reduce or, well, in this sense, increase their gas capture percentage. So we don't tell you how you increase your gas capture percentage, but we again put those hard kind of confines in the reporting structures so that everybody, you know, we can make sure that there are no kind of loopholes for it and everybody is attaining those goals. You know, New Mexico is, I think, really unique in a lot of ways. We have two major producing basins, the Northwest, which is primarily gas, the Southeast, which is primarily oil with a lot of associated gas. So two very different setups. And so, you know, I think we very much realized one size would not fit all. And so again, we're not telling you how to do it, but I think each and every operator is going to look at their probably numbers and go, wow, my tank venting is high, my blowdowns are, you know, really killing me right now, and find the opportunities that work for them.
And this is by the end of 2026. We had a question about.
End of 2026, you have to attain 98%.
And is that, are there consequences before then, or is it just there's that wall that's hitting at 2026?
Yep, each and every year, kind of at the end of the year, I believe it's going to be in February of each new year, starting in 2023, each operator is going to have to do like a certification that I have attained my gas capture percentage for the year. There are consequences if you don't attain your gas capture percentage. You know, we have a lot of different options for compliance. It could be administrative penalties. We have the authority to basically remove authorizations for transport, which would effectively shut in wells. And we also, within this rule, we have a new kind of piece. Operators who are seeking new permits, if you are not attaining your gas capture percentages, you know, and not meeting those certifications, you may not get a new permit, or you may get a permit with a lot of conditions on it. And so that's another kind of piece. But each year, yes, starting in 2023, operators are going to have to certify that they have attained their gas capture percentage for the year. So it'll be basically like broken into chunks each, but it's going to be different for each operator. One operator may need to get to 96% by year 1 and 96.5 year 2, 97 year 3, you know, or another operator might have to go up 4 or 5 percentage points each year. It's really going to depend on where you're starting.
And it seems like there's 2 areas there. You've got the existing production with certain economics, and you've got to handle that gas. But then you also have new drills that you can put new technology, new equipment, usually pipeline on. So it seems like and I know you're saying it's up to them to figure it out, but it sounds like that's going to be a challenge to how to manage both of those very different economic situations.
Yeah, you know, I think we heard some, we heard a lot of that during the stakeholder engagement process, and there are a couple pieces within the rule that provide flexibility for some of the stripper wells, so under 60 MCF of gas produced per day. So for example, you know, a lot of the operators are required to install meters on some of the systems, whereas a stripper well is exempted kind of from that and has additional flexibility. Auto igniters are required to be installed on all new flares, and sites need to be retrofitted. I believe it was 18 months after the date of rule enactment. So, you know, what would that be? Kind of end-ish year next year. No, end of year this year. You know, when flares need to be retrofitted, but for stripper wells, they do not have to be retrofitted unless you're replacing your flare or adding a new flare. So, you know, we did try to take a look at the costs and the economics and take those into consideration and provide flexibilities where it was appropriate. Another example is AVO is required weekly on non-stripper wells and monthly on stripper wells. But I think you know. And
that started in October, that requirement?
Actually, I think the AVO went into effect immediately with the rule starting back in May of last year.
Okay. And so weekly for every new, and then they have to report that, or is that just something they keep internal?
They can keep it internal, and we do not specify what form you kind of keep the information on, because we recognize that you may be required to do AVO potentially for the Environment Department, potentially for EPA, potentially for other reasons. If you're recording it on some other form for some other reason, that is absolutely fine. We do not need our own special form. So we don't kind of dictate what that form needs to be. We just say that you need to do those AVOs, you need to keep documentation of it. And if we ask for it, it needs to be provided.
And there's been a lot of folks coming up with different ways of doing AVO, but what is acceptable there, and what are y'all open to? Are there any new and different ways that y'all would accept?
I mean, I think we're pretty flexible. Again, we wanted to make sure that if you're having to do AVO for some other reason, you're not having to do it twice for us or record it on a different form. You know, AVO can be pretty simple. We do, I think, line out in the rule what you need to look at. So there's clarity, but as long as you meet those standards and keep that documentation, you should be in compliance with the rule. I will point out this is not AVO, but it's kind of a monitoring piece. We built in something in the rule called, we're calling it ALARM. Let's see if I can get the acronym right. Advanced Leak and Monitoring Reporting, I think. I always get the acronym wrong, or the words behind the acronym wrong. So ALARM is an opportunity for operators to use kind of new and emerging technologies to do kind of advanced monitoring. We require you to do it twice a year if you want to go that route. And you can apply for credits based on the leaks that you basically fixed and prevented. And so, I would encourage people to take a look at that section. It has to be an approved technology, approved by the OCD. We put out, again, on our website, on the announcements page, the forms that you need to use to get a technology certified. Once a technology is certified, it's certified for everybody. Right now we have, I think, 4 or 5 going through the process. So once those get certified, other people can utilize those. If you have a kind of internal company thing you've built that you want to get certified, you need to go through the process. But that's an opportunity too for people to help attain those gas capture percentages, because you can get credits based on kind of, again, like what you find in those surveys, but you have to do them a minimum of twice a year. And, they need to be above and beyond. We're not saying that you can utilize the like IR surveys that you're already required to do for another agency. It needs to be something above and beyond.
So are you talking like drones or continuous monitoring, or those examples? Or
we've had a lot of different companies come and talk to us. Everything from kind of the fence line monitoring pieces to flyovers to drones, to some companies kind of have built their own systems that they want to get certified, a wide variety of things. And we're hoping, again, I think we have 4 or 5 apps in right now to get, the first kind of handful of technologies certified. But, I would encourage operators, if there's something you already are utilizing, to submit an application because you can potentially get credit for it.
Okay.
The goal is to find things early and fix them.
Fair enough. What is y'all's position, or maybe you don't have a position, but position on continuous monitoring? That seems to be a big area. Are y'all agnostic on that right now, or are y'all pushing it one way or the other?
I don't think we have a position on it. I suspect we're going to have a handful of companies that do things like that who probably apply for alarm. I think where our goal is to minimize waste, and if it helps people find things earlier and helps you attain your gas capture percentage, that's fantastic.
Why not? Okay. Well, since we're just focused on waste rule, one other question on venting and flaring reports. Has that changed as far as when and how often and how that's done, or how's that evolved since October?
So the first quarterly report was due in February. The next quarterly report will be due in May. In April, it switches over to monthly. So then each and every month, operators are going to need to file this information as opposed to quarterly. The other thing that has been in effect for a while, well, since May actually, is the C129 reporting. C129 used to be a very different function. We kind of repurposed the form when we redid the rule because it was tied to the old rule. So C129s are required to be reported if you have vented or flared over 50 MCF, basically in a 24-hour period. And so those are required to be filed with us within 14 days if it's under 500 MCF, but over 50, or you have to report it within 24 hours if it's over 500 MCF. So 50 to 500, you've got 14 days. Over 500 is 24 hours. That is an online form. It is also on our announcements page. It is also on the forms page, but on the announcements page, there's some kind of guidance documents walking you through how to file those. So there's that.
Would that be similar to Texas's exemption reports that have been getting a lot of, I don't know if that might be asking a New Mexican about Texas might not be the right way, but there's a lot of talk about exemption reports in Texas and having to have those filed. Is that y'all's equivalent, do you think?
To be honest, I'm not familiar with Texas's exemption report, so I'm not sure. But this is not, just based on the name, I would say no, because this is not an exemption. This is a reporting requirement per the rule. And these still, all of these that everything that you report on your 129 ultimately has to be reported through your quarterly reports or your monthly reports as well. They still count against you on the gas capture, piece.
So, just so I understand then, if you're, and I said exemption, I think it's exception report, but anyway, it was, so if I know I'm going to have a certain amount of gas that I'm flaring, the C-129, is that just if it's additional than what my baseline shows, or anytime I'm flaring, I'm in a 24-hour period, I'm filing that form?
Anytime you flare more than 50 MCF or vent more than 50 MCF in a 24-hour period, you need to be filing that form.
So if I'm flaring continuously, I'm filing that form every day?
Yes, you should not be flaring continuously if it is likely that you should not be flaring continuously, because it is probably not an allowable reason to be flaring under the rule. The way the rule works is it kind of defines what is allowable, because we recognize that venting and flaring may occur and may need to occur as part of normal operations. But for example, one thing that is not allowed is continuous venting and flaring due to lack of pipeline capacity. That is not an allowable reason to flare.
Okay. So noted, and apologize for not saying that right.
No,
so
it's
now,
good. These
so
are good questions, because it helps, it's confusing sometimes. It's a new rule. There's a lot of content in it. And so these are your great questions. If you have the question, it's likely somebody else does.
Well, my audience is always very aware that I sound very stupid, and then I let the speaker sound smart by answering mine. So this continues the theme there. So, but in the attempt to try to sound smart, let's talk about C-115B, the thief hatch flaring. Did I get that right? And because I've heard different things about whether, do you have to monitor what's coming out of thief hatches or not? I've heard no, I've heard yes, I've heard you got to report it. Set us straight.
You do have to report it. It is one of the reporting categories that is required on your monthly reporting. Basically, it requires that you report venting out of improperly closed or maintained thief hatches. So it is a required reporting piece.
And on that, do you just, here's dangerous. How do you just calculate that base? You come up with some formula or some guesstimate? Because that's hard to figure out what is coming out of there. There's no real meter per se that you can do that. So how do you come up with that number?
But, that's a good question. And there was a lot, I think, of back and forth during the hearing on that, actually. But the rule allows for estimates in many cases. The key is, though, everything needs to be auditable. So if we ask you why you reported that, I'm going to make up a number, 50 MCF came out of your thief hatch that month, and we ask you how you came up with that, you need to be able to provide us with the calculation, the methodology, the modeling, whatever it may be, to get to that number. So you are allowed to use estimations in this rule. The key is that everything has to be auditable at the end of the day. And there is kind of a pretty robust accounting section through here, or throughout the rule, that kind of walks you through when you need a meter, when you can estimate, what type of estimation you can do. And there is a section in the rule for third-party verification. Just a note for everybody, if we come across reporting that just doesn't look right, we can't get the information from the operators, nothing's adding up, we can't figure out what's going on, we're not getting the information, we can require third-party verification per the rule. But overall, there's a lot of kind of, in the accounting section of the rule, it lines out when you can use estimates, what types of estimates, when you need to measure and meter, and all of those pieces.
Well, hoping not to make this completely about the waste rule. Can we jump over to the spill rule real quick and maybe just toss out kind of what the changes and the requirements associated with that will be?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, I say that it's a relatively small change that happened that has kind of broad implications to it. Basically over the summer, there was a rulemaking to change the spill rule in the sense that previously spills were not a violation, even if they were, basically any type of spill was not a violation as long as you reported it and you cleaned it up. It changed it so that now any spill is unlawful and the division may take enforcement actions. You still have to report it, you still have to clean it up, but just the spill itself is now a violation, or could be a violation if the OCD, chooses to move forward with an enforcement action. Everything else of the rule has stayed the same. So all of your reporting is still the same, the timelines are the same, the cleanup standards are the same. Everything you did before for a spill, all the same, nothing changed. You still file your 141 within 14 days if it's 5 to 50 barrels. And if you have to file it in 24 hours, if it is over 50 barrels of the release is that large. But all of those requirements, all the same. We heard a lot of testimony during the hearing, and there was data that was trended that a lot of the spills that we get each and every year were preventable. And so what this does, I think, is it encourages operators to take preventative methods up front so you don't have the spill in the first place. And so, I'm hopeful that the rule change really encouraged operators to take a look at their systems, take a look at why they have had spills in the past, and to, then take a look at the rest of their facilities and do they have those same scenarios at them? And if so, make a change. So that's what that rule did. But at the end of the day, the reporting is the same. The timelines are the same. The cleanup standards are the same. The change was that a spill used to not be a violation or unlawful. And now just the spill itself is unlawful.
And let me guess, all of that is on your website also.
All of that is on our website.
I'm catching on to how this works. So it's, all right. I know we're running out, but I do want, since we have you in a good audience, produced water rule. Same type of question. Changes, how's that going to affect everyone?
Yeah, so just taking a little bit of a step back, the Produced Water Act, which was passed in the legislative session in 2019, what that did is that very kind of clearly defined jurisdiction between the OCD and NMED. Again, there was a little confusion as to when you go to OCD, when you go to NMED. OCD manages produced water and the reuse and recycling of produced water for use within the oil and gas field. So if you are reusing it recycling it, cleaning it up for use in your completions later, that is us. If you want to clean it up for use outside of oil and gas, that is NMED. And so there's kind of that clear delineation. From we did a rulemaking in, I think it was July of 2020 now. I can't believe it was that long ago. And that basically added the additional requirement for operators to file water use reports with your completions reports. And that went into effect in November of 2020. So that's almost a year and a half ago. Also guidance on the website on how to file those if you do not know. I hope you know, but just in case. Basically, you're required to report what type of water and how much you used in your completions operations. It's 4 categories. It's water less than 1,000 TDS. it's 1,000 to 10,000 TDS, it's 10,000 and over TDS, and then it's recycled produced water. So you have 4 buckets which you have to report in, and you basically need to tell us how much of each type of water did you use in your completions operations. So that is required 45 days after completion. I believe it's with your C105.
And is that just completion? Well, that part's completion, but do you have one for produced as well?
Like how much produced water you produce? I do not believe so.
So it is limited just to completion. Okay.
It is limited to completions. Yeah, basically you're filing that when you're doing your frac focus disclosures and all of those pieces. And we have always, oh, go ahead.
Well, and what's the purpose of that? So you get this data, and then what do you do with that? Is that obviously you're wanting to use more recycled water in your completion. I think that's everyone's goal, but is that, what do you do with this data and how's it kind of?
That's it's a great question. At this point, we have not made any policy changes due to, or like from the information, but what we found a year and a half ago, right after the Produced Water Act passed, and we did a handful of public meetings around the state this was all pre-COVID. We did a bunch of like large public meetings around the state talking about produced water. And what we found at that point was the OCD didn't have any information as to what types and how much water was being utilized. And there's a lot of public concern that it was primarily fresh water, people's drinking water in a dry, arid state that was being utilized in completions operations. I think what we have found is that's not really the case, but we didn't have any information to say it was or it wasn't. And so now we have, a significant amount of data. I wish I had it off the top of my head, but I believe about 50% of the water is recycled produced water. And I want to say it was between 5 to 10%, maybe around 7, that was actually fresh water, being under 1,000 TDS that was utilized in completions operations. But prior to having this information, we didn't know. And so it was really helpful. It is really helpful to have this information so that we understand the volumes and the types of water that's being utilized within the industry. And again, at this point, we haven't made any policy changes based off of that. But down the road, there's potential that it could, and we want to make sure that everything we do is based in the the best data and science possible.
And again, kind of going back to the produced water side, that's obviously a huge, you see folks producing 1 barrel of oil and 3 barrels of water. Do you see anything happening there if you put into your regulatory crystal ball as to requirements for that? Is there a regulatory crystal ball?
I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately. That would be nice. I think it would be very helpful. Yeah, right. I think right now on average, we produce 4 barrels of water per barrel of oil. And, I'm not sure. I don't know what's going to be in that crystal ball yet. But one thing that we did do recently, and I want to bring up, is we implemented and put out on our website on the announcements page an updated, or actually not an updated, a new immediate response plan for seismic activity. In New Mexico, I think we've been rather fortunate. We haven't had some of the activity that's been seen in Oklahoma or even Texas, but we have had some increasing seismic activity over the last couple of years, particularly on kind of the Lee and Eddy County line and kind of the Texas border. We had a 4.0 magnitude earthquake back in July. It's the largest one that we've had in New Mexico yet, and it was concerning. And it was due to deep injection in this particular area. And we've seen, a handful of 3 to 3.5 magnitude earthquakes over the last year. And, we needed to take some action to make sure that we have a plan when this happens. We try to be as proactive as possible. But, I think we realized we also need a plan to react as necessary. And so that protocol is out on our website. It basically lines out what operators need to do if they are within 10 miles of a seismic event, depending on the size of that event and the magnitude, and how close to you, how close to the epicenter it is. It'll tell you what you need to do. So for 2.5 plus magnitude earthquakes, operators just need to start doing increased reporting to us instead of reporting injection volumes on a monthly basis. That needs to be weekly. There's a new online form for that. And information on the website as to how to file those forms. So 2.5 magnitude, you're looking at reporting. When you start hitting the 3 plus, there's going to start to be injection volume reductions that are required based on how close your well is to the epicenter. And same thing for 3.5 magnitude plus, there's a different kind of reduction requirement. So that's, I think one of the new things that we did, it was released in November timeframe. Operators got letters, I think in December, as well, or maybe it was January, make all of the operators who were within a seismic kind of response area all got letters saying the protocol's out, you need to follow the protocol. And also we have a GIS layer on our website that kind of shows where those response areas are, because it really helps people to visualize things. I'm a visual person, so it's very helpful for me too, but you can, take a look at where your operations are in relation to previous seismic activity. I'm afraid to jinx it, but we've been fortunate over the last several months. We haven't had any major seismic activity, so that's great news. I hope we can continue that, but if we do have it, we have a plan and a mechanism to manage it quickly.
Okay, well, I told you 30 minutes and I've successfully talked now for 42 minutes, so I apologize for that. But as one big last straw to put you on the spot here, we've talked about these three things. Is there one thing that you want the audience to know, that a rule that they don't know about, they need to be aware of, or something that's happening that you really think that should be highlighted that I successfully did not?
I feel like we've covered a lot of the bases. We are trying to make sure that we're operating as efficiently as possible. And so we have reorganized over the last couple years. And so operators may see some changes from that. We've been standardizing our operating procedures internally because the way we were previously structured, each district office sometimes kind of had their own internal policies. And, we're one OCD, we need to be consistent, across the state. And so, that has led in some circumstances to operators being like, wait, what's changed? And it's really that we're trying to be more consistent across the board. If you're ever curious, concerned, don't understand why something happened, and you're not getting an answer from whoever it is your contact is, don't hesitate to kind of continue to reach up the chain. We have a pretty robust contacts list on the website. It is under kind of, if you go to the OCD page and then go to, I think it's on the contacts page, there's a big spreadsheet with a list of each and every OCD employee, what they handle, what they manage, what, like, for example, if they manage C129, C104s, C101s, like, it'll tell you what they do and what their contact information is. And that's also a really good resource if you're like, I've got a problem with the waste rule, which is a big one lately, that's going to be John and Corey. And so that's going to tell you exactly who you need to contact, so you don't have to go through several people prior to that. We're trying to make it as easy for people as possible. I'm sure there are still opportunities for improvement on our end. We always take criticism and feedback, and happy to talk to anyone if they are concerned that they are out of compliance. I would very much encourage you to reach out sooner rather than later if you think you may have a compliance problem.
Well, that's good. You like getting feedback and criticism, because I'm sure this industry loves to that too. So, No, well, Adrienne, thank you very much. Did not disappoint me. I thought you'd be fantastic in explaining a very complicated subject, and you were. Again, everyone, we will have this on our YouTube channel because I've missed several of the things you talked about, or I need to go listen again to make sure I understand. And so if you have folks like that, give it a day or so and it'll be on there, and you can listen till your heart's content. Adrienne, thank you for your time. Everyone, appreciate y'all's participation, and we'll see you next time, first Wednesday of the month.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.